Gaza. It's estimated that some £25 million worth of arms export licences to Israel have still been approved by the UK government, which claims an ethical foreign policy. But it's not only sophisticated weaponry that kills. At the lower end of the market, some 639 million small arms circulate the world's troubled hotspots, and recent analysis has shown up to 40% of international aid actually goes on acquiring arms, not food or education. That's why tonight on Forum, we ask just how ethical is the international arms trade. And to discuss all this, an exciting panel. To my right, Patrick Nichols, a former Conservative minister in John Major's government. To his right, Ian Gordon, formerly of the British Army. He now runs a security firm supplying international clients in Afghanistan. To my left, Simon Hill, formerly a spokesperson of CAT, the Campaign Against the Arms Trade, and now an associate director of the think tank Ecclesia. And to his left, Richard Purcell, an anti-war activist and supporter of Smash ADO, an anti-arms industry direct action group. Welcome to you all. First of all, it's time for me to announce that if you'd like to be part of our studio audience here in London, you can call our hotline on 0208 728 6472 or email us at forum@presstv.co.uk. You should see those details on the bottom of your screen now. And now to the first question. Let's go to Nadia Lace to get us underway. Nadia, would you like to put your question to the panel?
Does the sheer size and profitability of the global arms trade cause greater conflict?
Well, who's going to kick us off? Patrick, do you think the arms trade is so big that it really becomes self-perpetuating? You've got the weapons, better use them.
No, I don't think it's self-perpetuating on that basis, but I think it is self-perpetuating on another basis, which is that as long as countries have the need to defend themselves, and countries always will, then there will have to be a trade to supply that. And unless one's going to say that a country cannot defend itself unless it manufactures its own arms, there will always be an arms trade. To that extent, it's inevitable.
Yeah. Richard, I mean, you probably don't agree with that.
No, but I totally disagree with that. I think there is the case in which arms manufacture, particularly amongst what we'd have to call the first-tier industrial countries, is based around strategic premises, and that the arms that we produce are used effectively to project a hegemony across the rest of the world, and that's how it works. And those countries are prevented from defending themselves, from developing the weapons to defend themselves, by our use of our strategic superiority.
Is your organisation mainly concerned with sort of UK arms, or does it have a more global perspective?
I would like to have more global, mostly based in Brighton, actually, but which is where we have to start somewhere, exactly. Where do you start dismantling the international arms trade? And where we've chosen to start is with a factory, Edo ITT, previously Edo MBM, which manufactures, amongst other things, components for the paveway bomb, which is the most used munition in the aerial bombardment of Iraq, most used guided munition, and also parts for the attack equipment in Apache helicopters, which were used in the Israeli assault on Gaza. So that's where we're starting the direct action campaign to actually shut that factory down.
OK. What about you, Ian? What do you make of all this?
Well, there is, as Patrick says, an inevitable requirement, unfortunately, to have weapons. The issues are both ethical, political and economic. The economic arguments are obviously quite strong, as you've highlighted in your introduction, that there's a huge amount of money involved, and that means people's jobs and work. I think that's not going to be easy to unravel and stop. I think the real challenge is to try and find some way to actually control the trade. The figures that you mentioned are mostly to do with countries' own production. The actual trade in weapons is probably in the order of between $30 and $55 billion a year, of which America is probably, and again, statistics vary, responsible for between 35 and 65% of that trade. Some of the trade is actually carried out on sort of barter arrangements, so actually costing it is quite imprecise. But it's still a very large trade, and I think the efforts to regulate it that the UN have been leading have not been very successful, because until recently the UN's efforts have been vetoed by a vote against them by the United States. But that recently has changed. On the 14th of October, the new Obama administration has actually said that it will go along with the UN's arms trade treaty proposals. as long as there's a consensus, they'll go along with it. So that's a step in the right direction. And I think what we really need to focus on is not trying to uninvent something that's invented, but to regulate it better.
I mean, is Obama just saying nice words which nasty Mr. Bush wouldn't say because he knows not everybody's going to sign up to this, and if everybody doesn't sign up, we're not doing it. So is it not just sort of easy playing to the gallery?
There's a bit of that, and the cynics are certainly saying that, yeah, this consensus thing is really sort of saying, well, we still hold a veto, and that's worrying. But it's at last a move in the direction of saying, let's have some internationally recognised treaty. And it's quite disgraceful that we've got treaties on nuclear weapons, we've got treaties on cross-border drugs. Pharmaceutical industry has quite strict regulation, but the arms industry is pathetically regulated, and that needs to change.
Yeah, interesting. What do you make of the Sun?
Well, I'm pleased to hear Ian supporting the arms trade treaty, and of course we're all very pleased that Obama has said he will back it. However, I think we have to recognise the severe limitations of that treaty. It's primarily aimed at small arms, and it will have an effect in certain parts of the world, parts of Africa and so on. However, it's unlikely to have much of an effect on the big arms-producing countries. In the UK, the British government has said explicitly and openly that the arms trade treaty will make no difference to British arms exports. They've assured BAE and the Defence Manufacturers Association in Britain that no difference will come to them. So once again, we see rich countries signing up for a treaty that primarily won't affect them. If I can pick up on Patrick's point about self-defence, of course, I'm sure many of us would think that countries have the right to self-defence. The reality is very little of the international arms trade has anything to do with self-defence. If you can show me a company that sells weapons only to democracies to use for self-defence, then I'll happily say something different. But the reality is that, for example, Indonesia, which has been a major customer of BAE and other arms companies, then uses those arms in its aggression against the civilian population of West Papua. Morocco, another international arms trade customer, uses arms against Western Sahara. And the civilians in places like West Papua and Western Sahara, the people who are under attack, the people who we might say need self-defence, they are not the customers of the arms trade, they are the victims of the arms trade.
This, I think, shows the impossibility of ever abolishing the arms trade entirely, because the mere fact that weapons may be used for aggression doesn't mean to say that you can turn around and say, well, we will take a view that you will only use them for self-defence. I mean, if we will only contemplate sending weapons to anybody on the basis they will only use them for defensive purposes, then how on earth can you make that judgment? Even if we talk about, as you said in your introduction quite rightly, if you look at what happened in Gaza, there are two sides to that. The Israelis will say that at times what they regard as being self-defence is viewed by other people as aggression. And I think this is the key to it. I mean, I agree entirely that an international arms treaty should bring down the trade in arms is a really good idea. But not only do I think it would be impossible to abolish the arms trade completely, I don't even think it would be desirable. And I think, in fairness, that is the difference between us. You're looking at the treaty and saying, we'll never be able to abolish it entirely. I'm looking at it and saying, I don't think it would be even right if we should.
Is yours an expert?
The same thing about the slave trade 150 years ago, do you think?
Well, I wasn't here 150 years ago, and neither were you, and I just don't accept the analogy. I mean, to use arguments like that, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Simon, I mean, when you talk about the export of arms, does your organisation think it's fair enough for individual governments to manufacture for their own purposes? I mean, do you remember, I'm sure you will, that when Britain was involved in the Falklands War, the Belgian government stopped the supply of small arms ammunition to the British forces? And they weren't manufactured in Britain, so there's a bit of a problem. And so do you think some governments are right to seek to protect their own citizens, to do their own policy, or is it just the export side that offends you, or does it all in principle upset you?
Well, I think I don't want to get into too much controversy about this or that particular war and whether a particular war is or not justified. What I would say, though, is that while I'd prefer to see an end to the arms trade entirely, I think we haven't even got to the starting point of ending exports to arms exports of arms to countries that are oppressive, that are engaged in human rights abuses and so on. Patrick says, we couldn't be sure that a country would only use them for self-defence, but there's many countries where we can be sure that they won't only use them for self-defence. We can sell weapons to Indonesia, we can sell weapons to Israel, and we know those weapons will not only be used for self-defence.